Have you ever gone back to an old favourite game, one that you might have great memories of, but feel underwhelmed? Well, you might be entitled to gamer nostalgia compensation. Not every game withstands the test of time. A game that might have seemed amazing when it first came out can often start to fall from grace just half a decade later. New generations of consoles or high-end PC parts becoming more affordable just leads to developers being given the opportunity to make their games look and run so much better. This means that as time goes on, naturally the standard for games just goes up. A lot of the time, there is very little reason to actually play some older games, instead of a newer release. The gameplay often feels outdated, visually, it's not going to be anything special anymore, and as for other people still playing the game, well, you'd have better luck getting an elephant to fit inside of a wheelie bin than get matched with a single friggin' person. But this doesn't mean that every game will become obsolete. There are still thriving communities for games that are old enough to legally purchase a crossbow. I mean, just look at chess. That thing still refuses to kick the bucket, no matter how many angry letters I write to the guy that invented it. So what sets the games that'll all but disappear within 10 years, apart from the games that'll stick around like a bad cold? A game still needs to look just as good 20 years after release as it did when it first came out. Obviously, the game isn't going to actually look any different, but the way we see it will be. Games that came out 10 years ago and were going for the whole breathtaking realism thing probably did look pretty damn great at the time, but as time goes on and other realistic games come out, we start to see flaws in how it looks. Games like Call of Duty or FIFA try to look better and better each installment, and when you go back to one of the older games, it looks fine. But now, you're used to how the newer games look. One of the best methods for avoiding this tends to be stylization. Having a unique art direction within a game is something that tends to be consistently praised in the gaming scene, but is often pretty overlooked by devs. Most of the big gaming companies don't really want to take risks. They would rather make something that they know the vast majority of people are at least fine with, to maximise their audience and profits. But this isn't the case for all games. The Borderlands series is practically known for its art style. It's sort of like this 3D cartoon where things aren't supposed to look particularly real. Even 10 years after the game initially came out, Borderlands 2 still looks really good while playing, and the art style still has the exact same impact that it had when it first came out. It wasn't created to fit in with how other games looked, it was created to stand out, to be unique. When you see this game, you immediately think of the Borderlands series. This also helps people that only got into the series through Borderlands 3 go back and play its predecessor. Going from 3 to 2 doesn't really feel like much of a downgrade visually, which is pretty damn impressive considering there are 7 years between the two games. Yeah, 3 looks more crisp and updated, but 2 holds out pretty strongly on its own. Creating a unique art style can really help to keep a game looking great for years to come. Indie games don't tend to have the resources to create the conventional, HD, detailed, realistic graphics, and so come up with their own unique art styles. You know what they say, if you can't join them, f*** them. Make your own thing but better, or something like that. Pixel art tends to be the way for a lot of indie developers. It's simple enough for a single person to create clear and easy on the eyes sprites, but with enough hard work and talent, can create some absolutely beautiful video game worlds. Everything from Celeste, to Stardew, to Terraria, to retro classics like Mario and f***ing Pac-Man. Pixel art is amazing, and it just goes to show how effective it is at keeping games relevant. The older Mario games are still being bought and played to this day. And go and ask the first person you find if they've ever played some form of Pac-Man. If they say no, run, that isn't a person, that's a spy. Aside from pixel games, a lot of the other alternative art styles work just as well. Many games go for that sort of cartoonish outline look, almost like Borderlands but in 2D. The Binding of Isaac did this, Don't Starve did this, Super Meat Boy did this, but one game that took it to the next level was Cuphead. This game based its entire art style around the idea of hand-drawn cartoons, and my god, it just looks amazing. These cartoon art styles are timeless in my eyes. Everything is so easy to watch, and in some cases the motions are so fluid that I feel like I'll never get dehydrated ever again. There are also of course things like the 3D polygon art style, and when done right, this can be pretty damn nice to look at. When you make the art style of a game something that stands on its own, and doesn't really rely on how modern it is, it'll last potentially forever. The overall game quality is something that is really important to help a game survive way past its time period. Christ, if the game isn't something pretty special, people aren't going to be playing it for 3 years after its release, let alone 20. This is why everything has to feel perfect while playing it. The controls need to be enjoyable, the story and combat need to be satisfying enough to want to play it over and over, and the overall game can't be too easy to get good at. It needs to keep challenging you in some way. A game that has proven itself in all of these aspects is Super Mario 64. This game is like a vampire. It's showing no signs of being able to die, and there is consistently a community of people that are obsessed with it. One of the main things that keeps this game relevant is its speedrunning community. There are basically always people practicing their runs on this game, and for good reason too. The controls are top notch. It feels so great to control Mario, to the point where I feel Odyssey tried to do the same thing with its own controls. Smash Bros. Melee is in a similar boat. That game has had multiple successes at this point, yet it still remains the favourite in the series for a lot of people. Even if the character or stage roster is so much smaller than the other games, no other Smash game controls as fast and precisely as Melee does. The skill ceiling for this game is ridiculously high, where people are still improving and competing to be the best at this game over 20 years on. If a game has a bunch of bugs or flaws, it can sometimes be hard for it to survive past the initial hype train. There will always be other games that people can go to, so to keep a game relevant at all, it needs to be pretty high in quality. The story needs to be gripping and remain constantly relevant, the gameplay needs to have enough variety to stay fun no matter how many times you boot the game up, and if possible, there should always be room for improvement. That constant challenge that gets you to keep playing. Something that we are seeing more and more nowadays are these fad games, trends that just completely take over the gaming space for a couple of years. Recently, we saw the rise of battle royales, PUBG, Fortnite, Apex Legends, all massive in their own time, but unless you're an active player for one of these games and follow them on social media, the only one you'll still consistently hear about is Fortnite. And a lot of that can be attributed to how it's trying to change its gameplay over time, making big changes in mechanics, and also constantly having big crossover events. Trends in general are something that a lot of people will chase. They'll do really well over a short period of time, but when they start running out of steam, they fall off fast, and it's onto the next trend. Games that try and do things that are completely unique and original will continue to stay relevant whenever anybody discovers them. But if somebody finds generic shooter battle royale after they've already burnt out on the whole battle royale craze, they're not going to care about it. Of course, there aren't going to be any games that are the only ones in their genre. Either there will already be games doing something vaguely similar, or it's just a matter of time until there are. But it's how you go about making a game that makes it unique. There are so many roguelike games that it's honestly ridiculous. But I haven't found one that feels similar to Risk of Rain 2, because of how original it all feels, from its bosses, to its items, to having so many different classes of characters. There's a lot more that 2D pixel game roguelikes have in common with each other than with a game like Risk of Rain 2. Same genre, same concept, presented in a very unique way. Even if another 3D roguelike started to do something similar, it would still probably feel completely different, with different enemies, items, and boss battles, to the point where it's just a different experience altogether. Unless it's just a clone of Risk of Rain 2, in which case, unlucky. There are so many indie platformers out there that it's starting to get hard to get excited about any of them. There is only so much you can do with the genre to stay unique without overcomplicating things. But I feel like Celeste is one of the slightly more recent ones that does it really well. This game is incredible. The entire thing is set out as a quest for Madeline, its main character. It's something that she just knows she has to do, and the story becomes a metaphorical and literal battle with her mental health. A lot of games try to tackle mental health themselves, but this game actually gives it a body and a personality, along with amazing level design, fantastic characters, a beautiful art style, and one of the best video game soundtracks to date. This game is my personal favourite that has ever touched mental health themes. Each character has a lot of stuff going on, and the magic of the mountain is what really brings it out for us to try and overcome. But it isn't about mashing buttons to beat up Madeline's other half. It's a game about understanding and learning to work with it. We physically cannot overcome the mountain without working together with this other part of us. And hey, I'd love to be proved wrong so I can get another game like this to play, but I don't think any game comes close to doing what Celeste does with the platforming genre. Keeping a game fresh and relevant can often come in the form of updating the game. Games like League of Legends used to look like this when I first started playing, and now, I have no f***ing idea what's going on. But it all looks good to today's standards. And if Riot just left the game how it was after its first release, never updated it or added new champions, I doubt anybody would still be playing it. This isn't really something you can do with a lot of games, but even Celeste got an extra chapter filled with some really difficult platforming challenges and a close off to the story. Stardew Valley is also still getting bug fixes and extra content every now and then, even while the developer is still working on an entirely new game. This keeps a game that is already pretty set for lasting a long time, even more likely to be one of those games that we just never stop hearing about. But keeping a game fresh doesn't always end up being because of the developers. The modding community is still constantly finding new ways to either improve upon a game, change some elements of it, or add new content. Stardew Valley has mods that add so much more content to it. Gmod has Prop Hunt, but prolifically, one of the best games to mod is Skyrim. Skyrim is already a game that oddly has stood the test of time, even if it's starting to look more and more dated as time goes on. This could be due to its huge amount of content, or the ability to create brand new characters with a different class and play through the game in a different, unique way. But a big factor is undoubtedly the mods. Anything from improving upon the game, to modernizing it, to whatever the fuck this is. The modding community is keeping the game from ever going stale. Gaming communities in general tend to be a pretty big factor in keeping games alive. You could take basically any game, and so long as you have a community that loves it, they will find new ways to keep it fun and entertaining, making it last for as long as they want to. Not all video games stand the test of time. Many will come and go just to be replaced with the next big thing. But every year, there are really special experiences being released from people that genuinely care about making an incredible game that will still be just as relevant for the next generation of gamers to play. Games that have their own unique art style will always stand out among the sea of realistic games that are starting to show their age. And combining this with a high quality of gameplay, unique ideas and stories, potential updates, and a good community that will do everything they can to keep the game alive, you'll have a game that doesn't just stand the test of time, but thrives for 10, 20, 30 years to come.